what I'm going to do is do a little introduction and then sort of talk about, what our competition is and what a little bit about me, and then a bit of a chat about some of the things that I see, both the things to consider generally about your script, and then also some of the common issues that I see in scripts that are entered. And then we will take the questions that I've already received, and then we'll see if you guys have any follow-up questions, and then hopefully that will be our time. So let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm just bringing up my little thing. Okay. Yeah, so thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate if you've entered the competition before, if you've done coaching with me, anything and everything. Your support is really the only reason why we're here and why we continue to grow. So please know that I am incredibly grateful, as are the people who do all the reading and the social media and everything. You guys are really the reason why we're here, and we're very grateful. So about me, in case you don't know, I'm Australian. I've been living in Los Angeles for 25 years now, or in the United States. I started writing. I got a job as a writer on a show called Neighbours when I was 22, which was an Australian soap opera that was at that time watched by 40 million people all over the world, and Guy Pearce was in it. I was doing that, and I was also working in TV news as a producer, so I didn't last particularly long because it just got a bit overwhelming having two jobs. So since then, I've done journalism. I moved to this country. I did a comedy series for the Travel Channel that I wrote and created. I worked on the feature film Borat as I ran the team of people who found all the people that Borat interacted with. So either you're welcome or I'm sorry. And then over the last few years, I decided to sort of I've been writing all the way through. And then I decided to sort of shift and try to help other people and obviously create this competition. So this year I've read about over 400 scripts, mostly entries in the Write LA competition and the Write LA shorts, but also obviously my clients. So, and the last 3 years, the winners have gone on to get literary managers. This year we're meeting with literary managers, this year's winner, so we're hopeful. And so far the response has been positive. So, and also my co-founder, Angela, who is now a working screenwriter and has just wrapped, I think she's just wrapped shooting on her 3rd feature, I think, for this year. That all started because she entered one of the competitions and we started working together, and I sent her script to a producer that I knew, and the rest is history. So this is all a long way of saying that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to spotting scripts and spotting writers that then go on to get some attention in the real world. So, and also, I'd also like you to know that I do regularly keep in touch with our literary managers who are reading our top 5. And so pretty much everything that I'm going to say to you this morning, they back up because they support, because I talk to them, I say, what are you seeing? And I give them my opinion and they say 100% agree. This is what we're looking for, etc. So my hope is to try to deliver some of that information now, because you have a few months before you get down to deadlines for the big competition. So you have a chance to adjust, or if you're writing something new, you have a chance to sort of think about it maybe in a different way. So, because what you want to avoid. Oh, also, I will say that I think it's also interesting to go and see films. Well, let me couch this quickly. A lot of writers go and see films like me, and you sit there and you think, I could have written something better than that. How did that thing get made? Whereas my script, no one will read or it won't get produced. The answer is there are a whole bunch of reasons why films get made, and the script is rarely the number one reason. And so sometimes it's good to go and see films that go wrong, because then you can sort of identify the weaknesses and be like, okay, I see where that went wrong. I see why that hasn't made much money. I see the mistakes. There are 2 great examples at the moment. One is Black Adam, which is a train wreck of a script. It's as if big CGI took it over and they got AI to do the script. So that's interesting to see in terms of connecting with your audience, because everything that we do here, everything that I talk about, is about connecting the audience with your characters on an emotional level. Because if we don't feel or care about the characters, it doesn't really matter what action set pieces you have or what very ingenious story points that you have, because we don't give a shit. Pardon my language. And that is one of the huge problems with Black Adam. They're trying desperately to make you care about characters, and they do nothing to encourage that affection or even understanding. It's just like, go and see it. It's a good example. So of what not to do. So I wrote a little note here that said, also, if you're curious about the difference between features and pilots, in terms of what I'm going to say, nowadays, the gap between the two of them is a lot more narrow than it used to be, because obviously in the old days, there were networks and they all had commercials and they all had a very rigid structure. And part of writing a pilot was to show that you could write in that structure. Well, obviously now we don't have that structure anymore. It's all over the place. So I wouldn't get too screwed up in establishing that you can do structure. I would get more screwed up in doing the things that we're about to discuss, which is really the fundamentals of entertaining story. So the difference between pilots and features, not that great. If you have a specific question about a pilot, like, okay, you're saying this, but does it apply to a pilot? Ask me and I'll try and clarify. So the most important thing to focus on in your script, and out of the 400 plus scripts that I've read this year and every year for the last 3 or 4 years, I would say I can count on one hand the number of scripts that made me genuinely feel deeply for the characters, made me care. The overwhelming majority of scripts that I read in these competitions don't spend enough time connecting me, the reader or the viewer, to the characters. They do spend a lot of time ironing out story and figuring out all of the arcs and all of the roadmaps and everything that you guys have been reading about for decades. And there are multiple scripts that I read that are structurally sound and emotionally bereft. And those scripts don't win. And what you'll find is that those scripts will do well in competitions, but they won't win competitions. They will. So if you're a writer and you're listening and you're like, I often make the semifinals or I often make the quarterfinals in my scripts, why aren't I taking it to the next level? I'll guarantee you, or pretty much guarantee you, that's the reason why, is that the reader is acknowledging your skill, but that's all. They're not feeling for the characters. They're not walking away thinking about those characters when they have a shower, or when they, even when they move on later on and they try to recall your script. It's and I had this. I did this for a long time. I would get feedback from industry people who were like, "Oh, you're a great writer. Yeah, this is great. This script is cute, or this script is funny, or this script is something. Keep me posted on what you do next." And that's code for, I didn't care enough or feel enough to be passionate about this script. And so in order to sort of shop it around or take it on, I can see that you have skills. I can see you know how to write, but you haven't pulled me in. And I used to get pissed off about that. Now that I'm reading hundreds of scripts a year, I see it all the way. It is, it's really interesting that you will forgive a lot of other things if you care about the characters. If you understand them, it doesn't mean you have to like them, but if you understand them and you have an affection or an affinity or a feeling for them, it makes a world of difference. So that's where we're going to focus, because that's the thing that I see more than anything. And that's the thing we need to work on. So let's see, I think I can do a share screen because I did a little graphic. Okay, bear with me. Now I'm going to start with the opening pages because that's really important. Okay, now can you guys see this? Can someone give me a thumbs up in Q&A that this is seen? Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that question, Anonymous. I'll get there in a second. Okay, what to avoid in your opening pages. So these are common issues that I see and that we see in a lot of the scripts, and a surprising amount of scripts actually that we see. They have very similar issues. And let me just clarify, the opening pages are really, really important. You may think you have a kick-ass twist ending, and that's great. And I'm all for that. But if you can't get us in the first 10 pages, we won't get to the twist, or a reader won't get to the twist, or a producer or a literary manager won't get to the twist. The first 10 pages today, I say this to everybody and I'll keep saying it, literary managers and the people you need to take the next step in your career are reading about 50 scripts every week. Well, they're supposed to be reading about 50 scripts every week. They are awash in scripts. So they don't have a lot of patience and a lot of time. They want the script to be good, but they can tell a lot in the opening pages about whether you've got command of craft, whether you know what you're doing, whether you've got the focus in the right direction, whether you're aware of what your script is, all of that stuff. It comes through very quickly. So your opening pages are very important. I would argue more important than they've been, given the fact that they don't have a lot of time, spare time. So this is what I see of things to avoid in your opening pages. Too much establishing scene description. What that means is that you spend, it sort of goes with these first three are sort of similar. Too slow starting a story, too much world building. It just means you get, and also trying to prove your literary skills. These are all kind of the similar feel. If you're a reader, if you're reading a whole bunch of scripts and you open a new script, hopeful and enthusiastic, and you see a full solid page of scene description, you sort of moan audibly because it's like, oh, I'm reading a novel. And it's like, I don't care. I don't know anything about your story. I know nothing about the people in your story or the characters, the aliens or the sheep or whatever it's about. I don't know anything. I'm brand new to this. And so you get a completely fresh set of eyes, because theoretically I haven't read, we tend to not read the logline. We don't know who you are. We know nothing. So you get to choose how you introduce your story to a reader and to a competition. And so if you choose to go into excruciating detail about the color of the sky, or the dew on the grass, or the what the characters are wearing, or the city that they're in, or especially if it's a sci-fi or a fantasy, the rules of the world or the history of it, you are immediately setting a red flag to a reader in a competition, and you're forcing us to absorb information that may or may not be useful because we don't know. And one of the reasons for that, and this goes to the too slow starting your story, one of the reasons I think is that writers, by and large, tend to get a little bit nervous about their story. So it's like, a little bit of apprehension, a bit of insecurity. What if you don't like it? What if it's, boring, or you don't understand fully what the character's doing? So then you won't really understand the story so I have to explain it all to you. Can you imagine if just imagine you're at a cocktail party and you're telling an anecdote to someone and you take 20 minutes to set up the anecdote. Who's still going to be listening? And how would you feel if that happened to you at a cocktail party? You don't know this person, they've walked in, they're like, let me tell you the story about Frank. But first, let me tell you about how warm it was that day, and how the sky was sort of this pearl blue, this amazing Technicolor blue that you hadn't seen, and the fog was rolling across the lake, and it was so cold and blah, blah. And you're just like, just get to what it is you're trying to tell me. Same thing in screenplays. So too much establishing scene description, too slow starting your story, and too much world building, I see just on the vast majority of scripts. So my advice to that is to be bold, to think of it as like, what I like to think of it visually is like almost like an animated movie where you've got a character walking down a path and you're scribbling the background in as they go. So you don't need to create a beautiful, fully animated world and then insert your character into it. just give us a rough sketch, get the character involved on the way, get to know them, and then you can start to color in as needed. It's like a need to know basis. Because I promise you, and I'm going to down, I think you can see my arrow, the trying to prove your literary skills is not a good idea. I see too many scripts where writers really feel like they want to be writing a novel. And so they get into quite literary prose. And this is a screenplay. In terms of scene description, I don't need literary prose. I need interior living room, morning, dude is sitting at his computer with gray hair. I don't need much more than that, because it doesn't matter. What matters is who the dude is and what you're going to do with him. So try to keep that balance. Try to really focus on what the audience absolutely needs to know, especially in the beginning. And try, and that goes to the larger thing, which is obviously everything in your script has got to be there for a reason. Everything, every single word in your script has to be there for a specific reason, and it's doing a job for you. It's got work to do. So, and that what that work is, what the job is. So that applies doubly to the beginning. Know what you want what the audience to know. Only give us what we need to know, and get going. Cheating on scene description. Let me just see. Oh, I see the documents list, not the point. We can only see your files, not the open PDF. Oh no. So you can't see it. All right, well, I'm talking anyway. That sucks. Wonder if I can tell me this, if I stop sharing. Can you see this? Can anybody see this that I just put in? No. Yes, says Clinton. All right. Anyway, what I've said of what to avoid, you can just scribble it down. I was just trying to get my head off camera for the entire time. What to avoid in your opening pages: too much establishing scene description, which is what we've said. Too slow starting your story, which is what I've said. Too much world building. Cheating on scene description. Cheating on scene description means including things in your scene description, usually about a character, that the audience couldn't possibly know if they were watching. And I see this all the time, and it immediately raises a red flag because it's cheating, and it sort of implies that maybe the writer is not in full command of craft, in which case it's unlikely this script is going to elevate after this. Now, what I mean by that is there was an example of a script, and hopefully the writer is not on here, but there was an example of a script where a character walks out of the house, gets into their car, and drives away. That's the scene visually. That's what we see as an audience. There's no dialogue. It's a character leaving the house, getting into their car, driving away. In the scene description, it says the character is leaving the house to go to church. Now, that's cheating. We don't know where they're going. So we either mention, and there's a million ways that you could show that they're going to church. They could be carrying a Bible. There could be a line of dialogue where it's like, see you after church, or, I hope I'm not late for the sermon, or whatever. If you want the audience to know that they're going to church, find a way to put it in. Using scene description is cheating. There are way worse examples. There is Tim sitting at a table. Tim is recently divorced and moved to New Mexico after his wife died. He's a graduate of Harvard, and he likes to read books. You think I'm joking? I am not joking. I see that level of detail in scene description when visually all the audience is seeing is a dude sitting at a desk. That's called cheating, and that will immediately decrease your script's chances of attracting attention and moving forward in a competition, because it is a glaring example that you are not in full command of your craft. So sometimes getting the information, and often a lot of the information that you want, that you're putting in, isn't actually particularly relevant anyway. It's not needed. So have a think about what you want the audience to know. Have a think about what your visuals are and how they're matching what your scene description is saying. Likewise, voiceover. I'm really not a fan of voiceover or flashbacks. You're not going to get me jumping up and down about either one of those, because I feel voiceover can get lazy. And also, having worked in TV news, I came to learn the beauty and the horror of voiceover, and a lot of writers don't quite understand it. And so I'll get literally a half page of dialogue, and it says, we see a map. And so you've got the visual of a map, and then you've got a character in voiceover saying, well, it all started in 1942 when I, traversed this, and after I graduated from there, and I did this and this and this and this. And it's like filling in all of this exposition, and the audience is seeing one image. And if you try looking at an image in a movie and count to 30, I would love you to email me what films do that. Have a single image that lasts for 30 seconds while there is endless voiceover. Not a moving camera, not anything, just a single still image. So don't do that. Find another way. But first, think about, is this something we need to know? The audience needs to know at this moment, especially at the beginning. Because if we don't put it in. Only tell us what we need to know. Don't cheat on scene description. Visual cliches is the next one. I don't know if you can see that. Visual cliches are things that I see in too many scripts. One is a character waking up in the morning, rolling over, turning off their alarm, getting up and going into the bathroom. Sounds mundane, happens as a way to introduce characters. It's a little bit less this year, but in previous years, it was up to like 15 or 20%. This year it was less, which was good. So maybe the message is getting through. There's two problems with starting your movie like that. One is it's been done so many times, it's incredibly boring and a terrible cliche. So don't do it for that reason. And two, again, I'm going to keep coming back to audience. You're putting yourself put yourself in the seat in the movie theater as an audience member watching your movie. You've paid your money, you've got your popcorn, the lights have gone down, you've got that little buzz, where you see the little graphics and you've seen the trailers and you're feeling really good and about, you're going to go see a film. And then up we come, and it's a character in bed, an alarm goes off, and they roll over and they turn off the alarm and they get off and go into the bathroom. Now, are you going to feel jazzed and pumped and excited about that? Versus something else? So try to avoid that cliche or subvert it. If you can think of a really innovative and fun way to play with that, but, good luck trying to beat Hugh Grant, on 4 Weddings and a Funeral, because that's how they started the movie. And that was like 25 years ago and it was hilarious, but it's done now. Another visual cliche, and the people who know me who are on this thing are going to be, who know this one very well. A shot of overdue bills, an image of past due bills in your opening 10 pages is exhausting for a reader because we've seen it. And it's boring and it is unimaginative and it is cliche. So I also have another issue at the moment. It seems to be the only reasons that writers at the moment want a character to do anything is either because of overdue bills, like lack of money, or a recent death. Like they're spurred on by the death of someone, so they do something, or they're spurred on by no money, so they do something. That seems to be the only two things that are launching stories at the moment, or among the two strongest ones. And I would love it if there were other things to do, because we've been there, done that. So please, if you're entering a competition in 2023, do not include a shot of overdue unpaid bills. Find a way, if you need your character to be broke or nearly broke or, you know, having issues, find a way to tell the audience in a way that we haven't seen. Get creative. So slapping in a shot of an overdue bill is the worst. So please don't do that. It immediately reduces your script's chances of success, I guarantee you. Okay, the next one, forcing your characters to react only. I did the trying to prove your literary skills, good. Forcing your characters to react only. Again, especially in the first 10 pages, there are a lot of scripts that you see that something happens to a character and then the character responds. And then that kind of goes through. Now, I know, you know, inciting incident, and I know that there's lots of jargon about that. And I'm not saying that you can't have something happen to a character, but I would argue that equally important, or probably more important, is to really focus on the decision that the character makes after that. Like, and that so that they, and it's more fun. Scripts, I would say that scripts generally are more impactful when there's a more immediate, like the character wants something and so makes a choice or makes a decision to kind of get that or to do something, even if it's a negative or it turns out to be a really dumb decision. That's kind of why we're in the story. That's what the story is about. If all they're doing is reacting, it kind of takes away our connection or our ability to connect with the character, because all we're seeing is sort of them operating in a kind of a panic mode or operating in a situation where they're not just making active decisions, they're just always responding. So you just want to keep an eye on that, because especially in the first 10 pages, because when you only have a character that's responding, you don't remove, but you reduce our ability, our being the audience, our ability to kind of understand who this person is and what their kind of moral compass is, or what choices, you know, what decisions they make. If all they're doing is sort of responding, it's just something to look at, because I see it a lot. It's much more fun when characters make their own decisions, make their own choices, rather than being forced into something. So again, usually forced into it by a shot of an unpaid bill. So yeah, try to give your characters some wiggle room, because really what the best scripts is really an emotional journey of characters who are making decisions, rightly, wrongly, and learning from those decisions and going on an emotional journey. So the less you can do of that, the better. Okay, I'll close the whiteboard so you can see me. Okay, so let me see if we have any questions on that stuff before we get to the next. Why do readers not tend to read the logline? That's a good question. I can only speak for our competition. I try to keep the log lines away from my readers. And by the way, I only have about 4 or 5 readers. So we're quite small in that. That's why I'm reading 400 scripts. I like to kind of be across what people are writing, and I don't read the log line, and I tend to not even read the title. I try to know as little as possible going in. I will, if you've paid for notes, I will have a look at your log line, because often the log line won't match or is talking about a film that doesn't happen until the second half. So, you know, it takes a while to get in there. So log lines are, as you know, awful, hard to write, a necessary evil, but they're not, I mean, if you think about it, how useful are they going to be before we get into a reading, you know, of reading the script? How useful, what is it? Am I going to read it and be like, oh, this is a genre I don't care for, or oh, I'm going to sit through this, or oh, this seems exciting. I mean, it's really only just adding some sort of reaction that is unnecessary, as far as I'm concerned. So they're useful. We're going to ask for them. We ask for them in our competition because we post them so that other people can read them once you've been selected. And once we're getting down into the judging, I do sometimes look at log lines and see, but it's really not I mean, log lines suck. And if you make the top 5, Angela will help you with the log line anyway. So they're just, yeah, I try not to put too much pressure on them. All right. oh, John Wick gets up in the morning. Yeah, but John Wick is, I'm not saying that's the thing. It gets done a lot. So they're getting up in the morning. So don't do it. Someone said, hang on, do you see any scripts this year that you loved but violated these rules? Yes, sure. There are always going to be rule breakers who transcend. Like there are, there's all sorts of rules about you got to do scene description, or you have to do, even like correct spelling. Like you can forgive correct spelling if you connect with a character. You can forgive. There are no hard and fast rules. It's not like we run these things through a template and it's like, oh, there's a shot of an unpaid bill, that script's out. We stop reading. Or oh, they're waking up in the morning, they're out. I'm just saying it's making your life a lot harder. And it also, it's coupled with the other thing, which I think I'm going to mention later on, but I'll mention it now. There seems to be a lot of scripts out there that kind of don't assume knowledge in the audience. They don't assume that we've seen a Western or we've seen a vampire film or we've seen sci-fi before, that there's a certain there's a certain understanding. The good scripts, I think, have a certain understanding that the audience comes into a movie with some knowledge. So you don't have to, it's like you don't have to invent the wheel in every script. You don't have to set up a whole thing. You can assume knowledge. And it's more fun when scripts not only assume the knowledge, but then sort of manipulate our expectations. Like you think you're going to be seeing this, but here I'm putting my spin on it. And because I know that you know what the tropes are in this genre, and I'm messing with you because that's what I'm doing, because I know that you know. And so that's a much more entertaining script. But yes, no hard and fast rules. There will be scripts that show a shot of unpaid bills that end up doing well in competitions. I'm not saying that there's never a place for it. I am saying that there should never be a place for it. And that if you think about it long and hard enough, you'll find another way that'll be far more entertaining than throwing in that shot. Steve wants to know, go back to why you don't like flashbacks. You covered voiceover, but not flashbacks. If you think about it logically, and which I do, I mean, I think about a lot of things, but if you think about flashbacks, what you're doing in a flashback most of the time is you're hitting pause on your story. You've hit the pause button. You're asking the audience to hang on, let's stop where we are right now. And so I can take you back to fill in some stuff that in many scripts I read is not particularly helpful, useful, relevant, provide new information that I didn't know. It's sort of filling in some gap because the writer kind of feels a need to break from the current story. It's like, let's have a coffee. I'll take you back into the backstory and we'll fill in some gaps. There are some situations where flashbacks provide very valuable information and absolutely are worth their place. So flashbacks have a definite place. They get overused and abused. And so my argument with flashbacks is you've got to have a really, really good reason why you are pressing pause on your active story that we, the audience, are engaged with in order to double back and fill in some gaps. And the worst ones are when, some character will say, also I think they're mostly irrelevant, but let's say, for example, a character says, yes, it was 1939. That was the year I broke my leg when I played football in the, championship game for my high school. And my life was never the same. And then we get a flashback of the football game. Well, why? You've just shown us, you just had the character tell us, that's enough. We have an imagination. We can be like, oh, I guess it was a football game, it was a break. Now, unless there was something specific in that football game that changed their life and we need to see it, well, then fine. You can maybe, slip in a flashback. But just visualizing what the character just said wastes time, as far as I'm concerned. And I know people will say, show, don't tell, but I don't know why you would waste time showing stuff that's already happened. I think it's much more interesting if you have a character that is showing the scars of former wounds, not necessarily physical, usually emotional wounds, and we, the audience, aren't quite sure why. And that we, the audience, have to figure out, we're like, oh, okay, what's caused that? Like, why are they doing that? Because again, you're all audience members. You all go and see movies. I guarantee you, you're like me and everybody else, where you're trying to stay 2 steps ahead of the story. You're like, why is that happening? Well, maybe it's because of this. You're thinking these things through when you're engaged. So why as a writer would you need to waste time to pause and go back and show an unnecessary filling into the blanks? So it's usually, not all the time, but usually, if you think about it long and hard enough, you can say, rather than showing what happened to the character, maybe I just focus on the end result of how that impacted the character and how that impact is affecting the decisions they are making in my story, rather than wasting time on explaining stuff that we really don't need as an audience. We just know, they lost their leg in the war, or they lost their leg in a high school game, or whatever. Move on. Okay. Okay. All right. So I think we're good with that. Oh, what makes a reader care for a character? There's no, well, actually, you know what? My first thought was there's no easy answer and there's no one way to get someone to care. Like it'd be easy if I could just say, just have them pet puppies, take care of puppies, done. We care. Not that easy. But I will say this ties into something that from my other list that I'll talk about in a minute. It's interesting, the emotional connection that you have with the character and you caring for the character, miraculously often is translated to the audience in ways that you can't quite understand because you care about them. And likewise, there are so many scripts where I can tell, I've been doing this long enough and I guess I'm good enough at this gig, but I can tell very quickly which characters the writer actually cares about and which characters the writers threw in because they think they needed to, or because they needed them to get from A to, needed to progress the story. So they needed to throw in a character, or, just didn't really think about that character as a person, versus the ones they do think about. You can really see it in a script. So I argue, not just me, Quentin Tarantino said a thing a while ago. He said, let's say I'm rewriting The Guns of Navarone, a World War II war movie. And as I'm writing it, I've just gone through a horrible breakup with my relationship. A long-term relationship was broken up, and I'm very sad. If elements of how I'm feeling don't find their way into the Guns of Navarone script, even if it's a genre that doesn't lend itself to that, then I'm not doing my job as a writer. And I think that's very valid. And that goes to which I'm going to say later on, but I'll say it now. It's the idea of write what you know. That people always say, write what you know. I say, write what you know, but make it accessible to strangers, because you can find ways to insert your emotional state or your some deeply held emotional belief for you, or something that you're working through emotionally, into your script, and that it gives the script more energy and more passion, and that comes through to the reader. So what makes a reader care for the character is kind of what makes you care for the character. And if you're struggling to be like, well, why do I care about this character, or why do I want people to care about this character, then that's a great indication that maybe you haven't thought through who they are and what their emotional journey is. So I would really argue that maybe that's, if you're asking the question, like, how do I make the audience care about this character? One easy way to go back and say, okay, well, who is this person and why should anybody care about them? Why do I care about them? And then how can I find ways to convey my feelings about them, or why I care, or why anybody should care? How do I convey that to an audience? So your connection is huge, your connection to your story. I will also say one thing I've noticed too with a lot of writers is you, and me too, you know how you get attracted to a story? It might be a biopic story, or it might be a quirky thing that sort of sticks with you. Why any of us write a script? It gets into and it doesn't leave. And we kind of keep thinking about it, and we're like, we spend all this time writing it, and then we write rewrites, and we go on and on and on. Do you ever stop to think about why this particular story is connecting with you now? Because I don't know if you found that you can be really into something now, and then you look back 5 years, you look back at what you're really into 5 years ago, and you're like, oh, I was really into that. I'm not as into that now. So there's a reason why your internal, whatever it is telling you to pursue this story and pursue this idea. And sometimes it'll be, oh, I think this will be a great blockbuster, in which case it's like, it's unlikely because you're coming at it for the wrong reasons and it probably won't work. But usually there's an underlying, and I don't want to get too heavy, but there is an underlying psychological reason or an emotional reason. And it usually is connected to something you're going through or you're feeling at this particular time. Like, I really relate to that person, or I really relate to that struggle, or I really relate to that challenge or that desire and not necessarily on a surface level, but pretty much always on an underlying emotional level. And if you can understand your connection to your story, like why you are so passionate about it, goes a long way in helping you construct a story that you can get others passionate about. So that was a long answer to a short question. Okay. Speaking of, let's do some of the questions, and then I'll do the other things in a second. So I'm not sure that you're seeing, I wasn't sure if the whiteboards work, but they work for me. And so let me see. Questions. Okay. Here are questions I had earlier. I'm getting different feedback from different competitions. How do I decide what to use and what to ignore? We've all been there. Great question. Feedback comes in different forms, and it always comes from different people. And obviously it's always subjective. So how do you know what to incorporate and what not to? The cavalier simple answer to that is a horse designed by a committee often looks like a camel, which means you don't want to take everybody's advice and then slot it into your script, or your script will start to look like some sort of weird version of wherever you started from, and you'll be miles away from where you started, and you keep telling yourself, yeah, but that's what the industry wants, and I've got to do this. The industry doesn't know what they want until they see it. So it's really up to you. And again, this speaks to how much in control and how connected you are to your script. If you thought about why you're writing the script and what it means to you and what your emotional journey of your characters are, emotional journeys, and what you want this script to say about the human condition, what subtext there is, what aspect of the human condition are you exploring, what aspect of these characters are they exploring in this? And this applies to every genre, by the way. It could be a horror film. There's still an emotional journey for characters. So please get that out of your head that this only applies to little independent films. It does not. Look at Guardians of the Galaxy, big giant Marvel movie, and it's about a bunch of loser loners desperate for family. And so it's always there in the good films. So if you know what that is in your script, and then you're getting feedback about that doesn't impact that journey, it's just talking about scenes, like I didn't get this or didn't get that, then be completely open-minded about making the change. If the feedback starts to speak to the emotional journey, well, then you're talking about someone inserting their own emotional journey into the script. And then you want to think hard. It's like, well, is this going to impact what I want to say? Am I maybe not saying what I want to say effectively enough? In which case they're tripping on something, so I should look at that. If I make these changes, will this still be a script that I'm proud of? And that I feel like is hitting the points that I wanted it to hit in terms of what it's giving the audience, how it feels. I'll give you a great example. I optioned a script, a father-son script to a producer. It was about a father and a son, and she optioned it, and we had lengthy meetings, and through those meetings, it became clear she actually wanted to make it a script about a mother and son. And that's a completely different movie. I mean, the relationship between a mother and a son, the relationship the audience has with a bad mother versus a bad father, these are all completely different things. So she liked my writing. She liked the central construct, but she wanted to make it a completely different movie. So obviously it didn't go very far. So it's really about being open-minded to feedback, being open-minded to changing scenes as they, if it's not resonating, if it's not giving the audience what you expected it to give, especially if you hear this repeatedly, I would caution against getting too hardcore in rewriting stuff based on one set of feedback, one set of notes. You want to try to run it through a bunch of different people. And you also want to, what I always found with feedback is if you get to the point where the person giving you the feedback is saying things like, I don't like the character, I don't like what the character did there, why would they make that decision? That is more about, they're now filtering the character and your story through their own emotional lens. That's almost in some ways more fun feedback, because then they're looking at it as these characters actually exist and they're making decisions I don't agree with, and that's pissing me off, versus feedback like, I didn't understand anything, I didn't feel anything, it was confusing, there were logic holes, that kind of feedback. That stuff you could look at and be like, okay, well, they're not getting it. So what am I doing wrong? When they're getting down to why would that character do this? I like that lady. Why would he be so mean to her? Well, then you've got a script, that's sort of working. And now people are giving you subjective feedback. So then you can start to filter. It's like, well, do I want them to feel that? Was this what I wanted them to do at this particular time? Am I hitting my marks? And then if not, adjust accordingly. If period scripts are tough. To try and launch your career with a period script, it's really hard because it just costs more money for producers. So they just get very squirrely about period pieces. So just know that. Time travel scripts in the same basket, because this person has written a script hinging on a missing plane. GPS tech means it's not an issue today. Look, time travel scripts have their own issues. Time travel scripts are a well-worn genre. I'm not a fan of. There are some time travel scripts that are, very solid. It's really just about what you do. It's a trope. Much like I'm not a huge fan of multiverses at the moment, because I feel like multiverses is lazy writing. I can't think of what to do. I'll just create another universe. So time travel is just tricky because you've got all sorts of logic to deal with. So they're complicated. I wouldn't recommend a time travel script being sort of your entry into Hollywood unless you have it really nailed down and you're making some sort of comment on something, because we've seen a lot of them and we've seen a lot of bad ones. So, it's a tougher road, but it's not by any means impossible. It just means you just have to, really have it. So, okay, that was my question on feedback. Okay, good. Let me see the next one. Okay, I think this is one's from Steve. I like these questions. How significant is a reader's personal bias in judging? It's like significant and not significant. Obviously, we're all people. I can only tell you from me and my readers that we work very hard to not put a personal bias in there. I know that I tried to look at the writing and did I feel something? We've had some scripts. The script that won this year, frankly, was not a script is not a film that I necessarily would have rushed to go and see based on the logline, but the execution was just undeniable. So, and I ended up feeling, having a whole bunch of feels that I didn't expect I was going to have. So it is not significant if the reader knows what they're doing in terms of, I don't like horror films, so you're not going to win. No, that's not a worry. You don't have to worry about that. If it's a good story, well told, it will find its way through whatever the genre. So the other thing to know is that what I do in our competition is that the readers all write a little blurb on why they gave the script the score that they gave it, or the flag. We have flags. So they have to justify their decision. They don't just write them off. They're just like, oh, red flag, this sucks. So they have to justify it, and as well as give me a little synopsis. I want them to write about it in their words, what the script was about to them, and then why they gave it the mark they gave it. So then I read all of those, every single one. So I can tell pretty quickly if someone has given it a flag because they don't care for the genre, or they don't care for, for reasons that are perhaps less or more biased and less objective. That comes through in the little note. And I can honestly say it comes through once or twice a year. It's very, very rare. And usually they're not readers that we use on a consistent basis. Our heavy lifting readers do a great job of not putting too much personal bias in there. Obviously it's impossible to extinguish it completely, but I will say that the personal biases probably happen in ways that you don't expect. Like, it's not, I don't like horror films. It's more, I don't like seeing unpaid bills in the first 10 pages. So it's like, you got to now be super impressive over the rest of the script to try and get me back. So it's that sort of technical stuff. When you've seen something so many times and you see it again, that is more of a problem than anything else. So, but again, a script can still survive, even if you walk into some tropes. So not too bad. Does the timing of your entry have any impact on judging chances of success? Now, what this means is if you enter an early bird fee or in the middle fee or in the late fee, have we already started reading, and does that in any way impact how your script is judged? Like, does our judging evolve over the course of the reading season, which is all valid. No is the short answer. I think, if anything, we're perhaps, if I'm entirely honest, I'll say we're probably a little more generous at the beginning of our reading, because we don't know what other scripts are out there. So, if you only have 5 scripts, you don't know if you're going to get any more. So you have to sort of look at them. But that all kind of gets corrected once we close, once we know how many we have, and, we're kind of able to kind of see the bigger picture, that it doesn't impact. Like, I go back and have a look, and it just sort of sorts itself out. So it certainly doesn't mean the reverse. It's not, we don't get to the end of judging, the end of the reading. We do start the reading while we're still open for entries, because we only have a limited window. I don't want to take too long with the reading. So it starts while we're open. The reverse, it's not the reverse. It's not like, we've already seen some good scripts, so, the scripts that come in on the final deadline, who cares, because we've already picked the winner. No, that's not true at all. We really do keep an open mind for pretty much every script whenever they come in. I'm also personally grateful for every script that comes in. And so everybody gets treated with an open mind. I can tell you, I just saw our readers in the last couple of weeks. We all get excited, which is lovely. We all get excited with every new script. So we all hope that every new script is going to be freaking awesome. So that doesn't change from day one to the end. Do I get more tired? Yes. But it doesn't really impact the reading. I don't burn out, which is, I guess, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, because I don't burn out. I'm a writer, remember, and so are the people who are reading. We're all writers. So we know what it's like to get to this point, and the bravery it takes to enter a script into a competition, and the respect that deserves. And we treat it with that respect. So your script is treated with respect, and we value the entry. So we don't get dismissive. We don't try to put personal views in there. We try, and we certainly don't shift our judging parameters as we go through the process. So timing, you enter it when you're ready. If you enter at the end, it costs more money. If you enter at the beginning, it costs less money. That's really the only difference. Do I suffer from burnout and start to shift my judging parameters? And what are my judging parameters? Oh, I already answered half of that. No, I don't suffer from burnout. I get tired. Do I shift my judging parameters? I might get, if I'm perfectly honest, I might get a little more frustrated at the new bills come, September or August than I do in April. If I see a shot of overdue bills. No, I don't suffer from burnout, as I said. What are my judging parameters? If you can make me feel or like either get teary-eyed or laugh out loud or scared or creeped out or worried for the characters, whatever the genre, whatever you want me to do, your script has a much stronger chance of success because it's very, very rare. I wish I could show you 400 scripts and tell you how rare it is. It is incredibly rare. Now, part of that might be that I'm dead inside, but I don't think so. Because the scripts that have moved me have usually won or made me feel things, have usually won or done well. And those writers, by and large, have found representation and got work. Or are getting work. So it's not just me. And this is where I get the judging parameters from the literary managers too, because we talk about this and they're like, I just had a coffee with one last week. And it's like the medium doesn't even matter now when they're looking for clients. Like I'm talking about writing a play and they're like, he's like, go and write a play. It's fine. Because what we're looking for is a strong voice and an emotional experience that can come in any form. So that really is our main judging parameter. And that's what I tell everybody. And that's what I will tell every client. Your job as a writer, our job as a writer, is to give the audience an emotional experience, give the audience an experience when they go to see their film or when you sit down to watch a film or TV. And we will, it's like I say to people, if you close your eyes right now and I ask you what your favorite film is, to flash on your favorite film, think about it, or one of your favorite films. I guarantee you the first image that comes into your head is going to be a person or a character. It's not going to be an action set piece, probably. So they're the most important aspect of your story because they're the things that the characters are the things that resonate, far beyond any imaginative set piece, far beyond any green screen blowing up of shit. And it especially counts if you're unsigned and unknown in the industry because they're looking for voice. And the way you are able to convey your voice is the way you are able to connect us with the characters in your story, the way you are able to have them do things that we may not expect or have them feel things deeply that we can relate to or we can at least understand and that resonates with us. That goes a long way to establishing your voice. Now, obviously, it's nice if you have a cute idea and you're not just ripping off, Star Wars, but it really matters that you're able to give us an emotional journey. And that is our number one judging parameter. Other judging parameters, really good story, well told. Like if I just want to turn the page, if you don't bring me out of it with, boo-boos, like as discussed, and then also if you're doing a genre, if it's a particular genre, we look at, I suppose, are you kind of respecting the genre, I guess, or making it your own in some way, but still sort of understanding of what the genre is and delivering on that. Like I will read a lot of scripts that if they put in a genre in a category, depending on where they enter, they'll write comedy and I'll get halfway through and it's like, you're not even trying here. This isn't, is this a comedy? Or, just sort of moves away from what I think the original intention was. So a consistency is another one. Something that is consistent from beginning to end is important. Just maintains the tone, maintains the sort of, just knows what it wants to do. Because again, we've always said from the day one that we're looking for writers. We're not looking for particular scripts, that we are trying to identify writers who are ready to take the next step, not necessarily a particular script. So our parameters are much more focused on what the writer is showing us, sort of not only on the page, but also sort of in between the lines, because you can really learn a lot from the choices that a writer makes, just in terms of how they use scene description, their command of craft, what decisions they give the characters, how deep they're digging emotionally. Just, that kind of stuff, you get a vibe from it. You can really feel it, and it comes through. And it also comes through whether or not this writer has spent the time crafting their script, thinking about all aspects of it, making sure that everything in that script belongs in there, versus the majority of script, which is, I can't be bothered thinking about this right now, it's a bit hard. That will do. This scene will do, because the next scene's kick-ass. We see that. It comes through. I promise. Okay. I have one more page and then I'm going to get to these ones here. I hope you guys are doing okay. Question 3. Okay. I see some writers keep rewriting and re-entering the same script over many years and do well. I tend to write 2 new scripts a year. What's the better strategy? Halfway in between is the better strategy. Part of learning the writing process, I just need a bit of cold tea. Part of learning the writing process is kind of knowing when to quit, but also knowing when to keep going. A lot of that depends on you and how you're feeling about the script, because if you're not feeling it, it doesn't matter how many drafts you keep doing, it's going to kind of fade away. And again, I go back to the emotional stuff. Like, you might be really jazzed about a script during COVID, and you're like super jazzed about, I'm going to do this, little thing about this and the enclosed space and blah, blah. And now you're out a year later and you've got this script and you're like, I'm not as jazzed about this anymore. And yet, then you might be getting like semi-finalists in a screenplay competition and people are urging you to do another draft. And you're like, okay. I would argue that's probably not going to work. It may, but it makes it more challenging. So, but also there are some writers who knock around with the same script year after year after year and don't write anything else. And I don't encourage that either. I think, because already in the conversations that I've had with the managers, they'll read this script and they'll say, have they got anything else? What else have they got? This one's fine, but I want to know that they can back it up. So I would not encourage a writer to have one script that they keep rewriting and keep re-entering over many, many years. I would, they can keep rewriting, keep re-entering it, but I would also, as long as they're doing something else, as long as there's another project, another script, because also remember, writing is a job, and in order to get good at any job, you have to practice, a lot. If you want to get to the pointy end, if you want to be a lawyer who's at the Supreme Court, you have to do a ton of work. If you want to be a doctor who does a surgeon who does the most tricky of surgeries, you got to practice a lot. You don't just read one book or practice on the same patient over and over and over again, or write the same argument to the Supreme Court over and over and over again. Sure, you might polish it down to this little nub of perfection, but then you haven't learned everything else. So every script you try, every story you try to explore teaches you something about you, teaches you something about your storytelling process, teaches you something about your writing process, and how you feel about things and how you connect with things. It's all a learning experience. So I do not encourage just having one script in your bag and continuing to polish it. It also shows a little bit of fear, I think, and it's understandable. It's like, I've written this one, I don't know if I can do it again. That's a legitimate concern. The only way you can break through that concern is by doing it again. Start simple, have another go. But the counter to that is writing 2 scripts new every year. And I did this for a long time. I would write a script, I would do a second draft, I would show it to people, I would enter into a competition, I would get some feedback that was like, it could be better. And I would be like, screw you, I will just come up with a new idea, because the next one will be better. I know you hate this, and the next one will be better. And that was just me avoiding doing the hard work, because, it's an old cliche where they say writing is rewriting. It's absolutely true. Your first draft's going to suck or going to be pretty bad. We all want it to be perfect. We all hope it's perfect. It's never perfect, ever. So once you get through the first draft and you get some feedback and you start to look at the second draft, then you start to make decisions like, is this something that I want to strap myself into for a couple of years? Or was this an idea that I had, I burned, chucked out a first draft, doesn't really work. I'm over it. I'm going to move on to another one. Now, you can sometimes is completely legitimate. And sometimes you're saying that to cover the insecurities of, I didn't like the feedback I got. I'm feeling a bit like a failure. I'm just going to burn this and move on to the next one where people will love it. You have to figure out the difference between those two responses. But I would argue that 2 scripts a year doesn't necessarily make you look awesome. It can sometimes make you look like you avoid doing rewrites. And anybody in this industry is looking for someone who can do rewrites, because that's where it all happens. That's your ability to receive notes, your ability to work with other people, your ability to even hold fast to what you believe in and be able to verbalize it, and then find ways to display, encourage others to get on board. That's all rewrites. It's all feedback. And so just sort of plowing ahead and writing two new ones. Yes, you're learning more about craft, but you're only kind of learning about one aspect of the craft. So maybe dig your heels in on a couple of them and, start to do some, because, honestly, Angela, I mentioned, who just finished shooting a film in New York. I read that script probably 5 years ago. And that long, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I would suggest it's probably gone through, 20 rewrites since then. So rewrites is the business. So you got to kind of manage that, learn both skills. Should I spend money on coaching coverage before entering a competition, or is my limited money better spent on competitions? Is coverage a waste of time and money? What a question I get asked a lot. And I hate that dude who does the podcast who says you should never get coverage on a script. It's all a ripoff, because he's a paid screenwriter, and he is essentially suggesting that nobody in the NFL should be a head coach unless they've won a Super Bowl. And that is inherently stupid. So there are plenty of people like me who, I think I'm a good writer, but I also think I'm a good coach. I can see things in scripts. So should you spend money on coaching coverage before entering a competition? It really depends on what you want to get from the competition, because sometimes the competition, if it provides coverage, will give you that without you having to, spend extra money. It also depends on what you want the competition, like what the prize is and what you hope it will achieve. And I say that to everybody entering a competition. It's like, know what you want from the competition. If you just want to feel good about yourself, enter the San Jose, under 12s screenwriting competition and get a quarterfinalist medal, because you'll probably get one if you just enter. And that'll make you feel good, especially if you don't suck as a writer. And I'm sure you don't. So, you'll get some little wreaths and you'll feel good about yourself, and that's great, and maybe you'll win one. And I won one in Florida once, and they actually sent me a check for $500 and said they would connect me with the industry, and they never did. They just sent me the check for $500, but they sent me the check, so that was nice. But it was a Florida, I want to earn some money from screenwriters competition, and pay out $500 to the winner and hopefully make some money. And I don't think that competition exists anymore. So if you just want to try and win some money, or you want to try and get a couple of quarterfinalists nods, great. Know that's what you're going to get from the competition and enter accordingly. If you want to try and get a manager or an agent and you're entering like our competition, well, that's different. And, you have different expectations. So, and same with Nichols or Page or Austin, know what you want from it. And so if you're entering those competitions, including ours, I would maybe take it a little bit more seriously. You can maybe get some feedback. I probably wouldn't enter a first draft into any of these competitions, just because it's a bit of a waste of time and money, because you're unlikely to really hit it big. I've done well on second drafts. It's funny that I've done better on second drafts and then I've gone back and written it and made it worse. But so it's, and then coverage in and of itself. Well, obviously I do coverage. I mean, I do coaching. I don't do coverage, which is sort of different. I'm a big fan of coaching. I think what I do, just to plug myself, is all the things we've discussed today is what I kind of work with the writer. It's like, why do you want to write this? What is it that is, speaking to you emotionally? How can you connect better to it so that we can connect better to it? All that kind of stuff. Sometimes you need help with that because it's really hard to see sometimes. So I prefer that kind of coverage to, on page 7, there was a typo, or, the antagonist, all those ones that give you a whole bunch of jargon, which can really fill your head with a bit of nonsense. So, so it's sort of a balance, especially if your money's limited. I wouldn't spend all your money on coverage because, or coaching, because that's not going to get you noticed in the industry. Some competitions, you do stand a chance of getting noticed in the industry. So not all, only a very few. So trust me, I've entered a lot of competitions. So you want to kind of balance it out. So obviously and then even when you're getting notes within, like we all know, getting notes from Austin, it comes, I think, for free, but it's, who knows who's writing it. It's, I think some of the other competitions do a better job of providing notes, but again, balance. I would probably, and whether you pay for coverage before you enter a competition or whether you are able to give it to a friend, either way, I think before you enter a competition, you might want to run it by someone on some level, or you use the competition to see whether or not you're on the right track. I've done that. I've decided not to show anybody and just to slap it into a competition and see how I go. But I've never really done that with a script that I'm not reasonably comfortable with. On some level. So, both. But coverage is definitely not a waste of time or money, or coaching anyway, is definitely not a waste of time or money. It really just depends on who you use. It can be very valuable, in fact, I think. And I'm not just saying that because I do it, but I am also saying that because I do it. So, yeah, there you go. All right. They are the questions I got beforehand. So now I can look at these. How do you feel about Save the Cat's Beats versus the hero's journey versus other systems and sticking to certain page numbers? How much does the particular system theory matter for story structure? Oh, Jonathan, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of a hardcore template. I think it's missing the point. I think, as I've said earlier, there are plenty of scripts that I've read that hit all the marks, apparently, have the antagonist thing and the journey of this and the on page 7 this and blah, 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 blah. And it becomes and it's a soulless script, a lifeless, soulless script that I care nothing about. And those scripts are a struggle because it's like, oh, the writers, got good command of craft, but they haven't done the stuff that's really compelling. So I'm not a fan. If it works, but I also know when you're sitting down to write a script for the first time and you don't know what the hell you're doing, to have some sort of a template is quite reassuring. And so I understand that and accept that. And if that works for you, having that, beat point thing where you can sort of use as an aim, for sure. But I don't think I've ever gotten feedback in my entire life, or ever given feedback in my entire life, that's been like, oh, the climax came 3 pages too early. Or, the inciting incident should have happened on this page, but it happened on that page. And if I've had any feedback that's sort of got anywhere near that, it's usually, the rest of the feedback usually undoes itself as well, where it's like the reader is focused on kind of the wrong things. So, because, they're relying on jargon to sort of show that they know what they're talking about. So, but it's also handy to know the rules and to learn the rules, if only to sort of subvert and manipulate. So I will say that's one reason why, if you follow our Instagram, we're doing the 20 days of Phoebe again this year. Phoebe Waller-Bridge has some great insights on our Instagram every day. And what I love about her writing more than anything is that she was very aware of the audience in every scene. And so it was like, this is the information I want to deliver. How can I do it in an entertaining way? And that drove every script she writes. And I think that's far more important than Save the Cat, Hero's Journey, all that other stuff. Story by Robert McKee. I went to his seminar. I completely respect what he was able to do. I think we're moving into an era where the game is changing. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I think as an audience, we're getting a little bit bored with the 3-act structure. As an audience, we're getting a little bit bored with the whole MacGuffin thing, where it's like the object that the bad guys want or the good guys need to protect, and gets, we all know by about page 75, the bad guys are going to get it and all is going to look lost, and then it gets resolved. So, if you're making a choice between hardcore structure and emotional connection with the audience, pick emotional connection with the audience. If it means fudging some of your structure, because that's the way the story's going, do that. Would the feasibility of making a script, budget, etc., be a factor in the script winning or not? That's a good question. No. Mostly. Again, if you think about where you're at in your writing career, and you think about who's going to be reading you, and you think about what they're going to be able to do, there is no one path into being a paid writer. There just isn't. And people will tell you all their journeys, and you can read about all these writers and how they got in, and they're all different. But like, for example, someone entering my competition, because our prize is, you get read by literary managers. So if I'm sending a script to a literary manager of this massive, big budget script, would that impact the manager's decision to rep you? Not entirely, but it just sort of raises the bar that if you're spending all that money and you're doing a big giant, thing, you've really, really got to keep track of the emotional journey. Because if it's just big for big's sake, that's not worth, that will be a factor. Because again, look at the original Star Wars. It didn't have the biggest budget on earth, used a bunch of dodgy special effects, but it told stories about people and characters and robots, or that we cared about. So if your focus is on massive set pieces, you might just want to look at, do you still have that emotional journey? Because that's what the lit managers, that's what I'm going to be looking at, the judges are going to be looking at of every competition. And the literary managers who are going to be the people who launch your career, they're going to be looking at that too, more than they're going to be looking at your ability to write big, splashy things. Also, just the reality is that you're not going to sell that to a studio, because they're not buying big, splashy, big budget scripts from unsigned writers anymore. That's just not happening. So that doesn't mean that you don't keep it in your kit bag for when when you do have some capital in Hollywood, you can pull out the script and then see what happens. But as an introduction, again, all these scripts that you're entering into these competitions are introducing you to first the judges and then hopefully literary managers or whatever to Hollywood. So what do you want them to know about you in the pages of the script that you're writing? Because that's really what this is. There's many writers' scripts that get them into the industry are never made. So Angela being an exception, but she wrote a very small sci-fi script, a sort of a low budget sci-fi script, 2 of them actually. So she was able to show her voice and show, in a thing that could get made. When it comes to underdeveloped characters, protagonists, what do you come across the most? What is bad writing when it comes to character development? Oof. Bad writing or underdeveloped characters are just, especially support characters, where they're just there because the writer needs them to deliver some information to the main character. So they're not thought of. And again, remember, you're going to have an actor doing it, and someone's going to get paid, and they want to, make that character come to life. So you could make your supporting characters have some quirks and charm and still deliver the information. In terms of central characters, bad writing is really getting really lost in the story and never giving us, the audience, time to check in with how the character is feeling and how this is impacting them, what's happening to them, what's being done or what they're doing or what's going on, is how the character is feeling about it gets ignored. And people worry that they're going to bore the audience, so they have to give them another explosion or give them another something. Having no quiet time, if you look at all the big movies or all the big TV shows, they all have quiet time. And where a newbie writer, I would say, or an unsigned writer, would starts to get that squirrely feeling that you're boring the reader. It's like, oh, they're having emotional conversations. I've got to get back to, wowing them. No, we want those emotional conversations, and they're often more impactful than any wowing you could possibly think of. So, because again, when I talk to these managers, some of them will say, if there's an action set piece, they will run their finger down to see if there's a character in there who dies, and like one of the central characters has died, and in other words, they need to care about it. Otherwise, I'll just skim through it and move on, because it's irrelevant at this point, because it'll change so many times between now and shooting that it really doesn't matter. It matters more how we feel about the characters and giving the characters a chance to breathe and show their journey and, express their whatever it is they're feeling, or, in whatever way, either verbally or with their actions. So, and that usually means, especially when you sit down with a writer and say, well, why is this character in here now? Like, why? And often the writer will be like, and I've done this, where the writer's like, oh, because I needed them to be, not because they are contributing, this is who they are and this is what I needed them, why they're there and how they're interacting and all that other stuff. It's just sort of like, oh, I shoved it in. Likewise, people getting lost in talking point. Characters have one line, like waitresses talking and stuff, just irrelevant and unnecessary. So that's, underdeveloped characters is really just when the writer hasn't thought through who this person is and what their journey is. They're just chucking a whole bunch of stuff at them constantly. We never get a chance to care about them. We never get a chance to really understand. We never get a chance to see how the journey is evolving or how they are evolving. And all this can be done, it's just you sitting there quietly saying, well, who is this person and what do they have, what are they contributing? Why am I doing this? And, you'll connect to it. It happens. Oh, it's 11:27 already. Okay, I have one final thing to show. Thank you. I have things to consider. Yeah, which I think I've pretty much covered. So let's have a look. I don't know if you can see this, but I'll go through it. Story versus emotional depth. I've definitely covered that. If you're choosing, choose emotional depth. Dig deep. I see a bunch of really good writers. I've seen a bunch of really good scripts that don't win. And it's the most frustrating thing, because I see them, they're super talented, and it's like they are circling around the hole. Imagine it's like a emotional depth is a well, and they're running around the edge of it, peeking into the well and then pulling back. And it's like, just jump into the well, please. You have the skills and the talent. Once you jump in there, you will elevate your script to something really good, really special. But right now, you're just sort of running around the outside, showing, how awesome you are, but not giving me that final thing. So emotional depth. Subtext, same thing. If you don't know what your script is about in terms of, the theme, the underlying, every script should really be trying to take a look at some aspect of the human condition underneath. Have a think about that before you have a think about anything else. What are you saying with the script? You're creating art. All art contributes to the conversation, to the cultural conversation, always has. And by the way, no art has ever achieved 100% success rate from the public. Even people hate the Mona Lisa. So please don't think that you're going to please everybody. It's just important that you please yourself. You're certainly not going to please judges from screenplay competitions, and that's just on them. If you get a crappy result, it sucks. I know it. It stings, especially when you see other people, celebrating on Twitter, and you're like, control what you can control, which means, get back into the craft, keep going, because you're never going to please everybody. Navigating genre tropes. Again, that's what I think I said, is understand our audience knowledge and experience. If you're writing a Western, we know about Westerns, we've seen them. So how are you making yours different and special? And yours, original versus derivative. I see a few scripts where people seem to have focused on showing me that they can do a version of Die Hard. And great, but probably not as good as showing me something that's yours. Again, the managers want a voice, which I'm going to get to in a second. So just you showing you can mimic, whilst that's a skill and does work in some TV writers' rooms where you're able to mimic. So that is definitely a skill in terms of mimicking other people's voices. In the first script that sort of launches you, they kind of want to see your voice, because writers' rooms are all about bringing diverse voices into the room who can also mimic. Sounds counterintuitive and stupid, I know. It is. Write what you know. I say write what you know, but make it accessible to strangers. That doesn't mean you write your personal story, because most of us have pretty boring personal stories. It means your personal emotional issues, or what you connect to, or your attitudes about things, and inserting them into a story that has more in it for total strangers. So that really is what your voice is. It's your ability to kind of insert your skill set, your personal, unique life experience into an interesting story with interesting characters. It doesn't mean telling your own story. It certainly doesn't mean trying to be super witty in scene description or super literate in scene description. Like, there's my voice, I'm witty. No, it's not that. It's that you have something to say, and that you're connecting with it on an emotional level, and you're going to say it. So that's what they're looking for, an authentic, like an authentic emotional experience. So understanding the genre that you're in, navigating that, understanding our expectations, giving us something that we haven't seen. I watched Emancipation last night because our friend Charmaine Bingwire is in it. I urge you to watch it just because of that. She's been a reader for us for years. She's Australian. She's lovely. She's my friend. And she's playing Will Smith's wife in a film that doesn't give us anything we haven't seen, and really struggles to have a point, which is sad. Biopic dangers. Biopics are really hard. I see a lot of biopics, biography pics about, you fall in love with a famous person or a person in history and you want to tell their story. I think that's lovely. Again, if you can find a way, just telling a biopic story is really hard to win a competition with, because what a biopic is, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. It's not the way. Each scene should sort of lead to the next scene, not just be its own chapter. And biopics, by their very nature, are chapter oriented. Just gives you an extra strong, hard challenge. I would not encourage you to enter a biopic into screenplay competitions. By all means, have one again in your kit bag, but you're not letting readers know what you're capable of. You're just telling somebody else's story. And if you are in love with this person, then maybe don't tell their entire life. Tell a certain aspect, one particular period of their life that gives you the chance for an emotional journey and a character arc. Using scene description sets tone. That's what I mean before. Like, people want to be witty in a comedy in their scene description. Don't waste words. Just get to the point. It doesn't help your cause. Don't think I've ever laughed out loud at a witty scene description. I don't think I've ever been. Yeah, I don't think I have. It's not. But I can tell you the amount of times I was like, oh, you're trying to be funny here. You're just wasting my time. Just tell me what's in the scene so I can get going into the story and the characters. I don't need this. So I would not encourage you. I would encourage you to be very sparse with your scene description. You can set tone a little bit with it, but don't overuse that. It's not a magic pill. And then the last one is ing words in scene description. There is a little catchy phrase that I can't remember what it is that someone told me once, but basically you want to try and not have ing words. Like, he's bringing the bowl of soup to the table. He brings the bowl of soup to the table. I know this is a very small and somewhat irrelevant thing, but if you knock off your bringings, or your ing words in your scene description, it makes it more active. It makes it shorter. It's a tighter, easier, more fluid read for the reader. I promise you, it makes a difference. It just tightens everything up. So there is my one practical tip. Don't use ing words if you can avoid it. I know there's a proper English for it, but there. Okay, so I think that's it. I have one. Thank you so much for letting me ramble for an hour and a half. I have a goodbye that I wrote. So here you are. Script competitions can be incredibly helpful and can launch careers. And I know that we have, so have Nichols, Page, and Austin. So anyone who says they're a waste of time is a writer who didn't do well in a competition. But they are subjective. A script might do well in one and not in another. So that's entirely out of your control, which is what I said. So I really focus on controlling what you can control, which is continuing to do the work to become a better writer, which involves actually writing a lot, being open to feedback, but not too open, as we discussed, learning other skills like trusting your gut, finding your voice, knowing when to keep exploring an idea and when to let it go. These are all things that you really need as a working writer. And making sure you find the personal connection to every idea. There's always a reason why something triggers you at a particular moment. As I said, the more you understand the trigger, the deeper emotional connection you'll have with your script. Don't run around the well. For example, I watched Moonfall, Roland Emmerich. Have you noticed that most of his involve a father and son relationship? You know, it's something that resonates with him and he keeps doing it. There are no guarantees in script competitions or in the business. One person's genius script is another person's shrug. So, you know, don't forget that. So make sure that you're pleasing yourself first. So if you get to the point where you're getting this feedback and you're like, this is not what I wanted to do, no one's forcing you to do it. Unless they've optioned your script and they've given you a whole bunch of money, in which case, shut up and take the money. That being said, there are lessons to be learned in competitions. If your script keeps getting stuck in the first round, it's not the competitions or the readers or the position of the moon that's the issue, it's your script. Don't take it personally. Control what you can control. Find ways to improve your command of craft. Be open-minded to the idea that your script may not be resonating with your audience and find out why. Or be open enough to maybe say, you know what, this idea isn't working as a script. I'm going to give it the boot, or as a TV show. If your script regularly makes the quarterfinals or semifinals, but no further, then have a look at your emotional depth, as we've discussed. It means that people are noticing, it does mean people are noticing your command of craft, but they're not connecting emotionally. Being a solid writer who does well in competitions takes time, hard work, a willingness to dig deep emotionally, and self-awareness. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. If you want to work as a writer, then treat what you do as work. If you want to write for fun, awesome. Just don't put too many expectations into script competitions. Basically, if you're not doing the work and you don't get the results, don't be surprised. Script comps are a tool. Be aware of what each one offers as a prize, understand the limitations, use every entry as an achievement, whatever happens, because you wrote a freaking script and you didn't just talk about it, you did it and you entered it into a competition. So, you know, that's awesome. Never forget that. That is an achievement, whatever happens. And that's it. Good luck in 2023. I hope that this webinar has been helpful. As you know, I'm always here if you need any coaching. And we'll be open for Write LA on March the 1st. And then finally, right before I go, Natalie, who I don't know if she's still here or not, is my social media manager. And she's done an amazing job. And she continues to do an amazing job. And she's desperate for us to get to 1,000 followers on Instagram. And we're at like 970, 980, something like that. So if you have a moment and you have Instagram and you feel like following us, or you want to tell a friend to follow us to make Natalie happy, we are at Write LA, just all one, Write LA, WRITELA. That's it. So unless anybody has any last minute questions, I'm done. I'm going to say farewell and thank you. No one has any more questions. All right, cool, thanks. And if you do, you can always email me. I'll try my best, but I hope this was helpful. And let me know what you think. And, you know, if we might do it again sometime. Bye.